And now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful tonight for God showing me that I am worthy of love. Before coming to Plainfield, I always had this thought that if I wasn't fulfilling some role or purpose for people, that they had no reason to like or love me. Because of this, I always felt a moment away from being discarded, since I never knew how long my usefulness might last. I feel it was this constant worry that brought me so close to suicide many times in my life. I actually even entertained the idea when I first arrived in Plainfield that I would do whatever work I could do for this church, and then I would be allowed to end my life. However, the teaching here is too practical and too loving for that thought to have remained for long. Christian Science, as I am learning at this church, helped me to answer a question I had since I was young. Am I an accident? The wonderful answer is, I am not an accident. And none of us are accidents. We are all God's ideas. I'm so grateful for Christian Science being made available so that we can realize that worth and live up to the potential that is inherent in being God's idea. I don't know the half of what that means for me in the long run, but I do know it allows me to put the rest of those beliefs I had about myself that only held me back and held me down so that I might serve God. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Benjamin from New Jersey, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank the readers tonight. It was very, very powerful reading. I'm so grateful to be here tonight. There's no better place to be than to be here in the midst of God's loving people. 2 days ago, I was working in our house. I was on the roof, and I hurt my finger, and it hurt really bad, and it started to bleed, and immediately I knew that it was error that was trying to interrupt the good work I was about to do. And the truth came to me immediately too, because I recognized what it was. And the truth came direct to me to declare it immediately. And the truth was what I've been learning from this church. The wonderful statement I've heard over and over. And the statement was that God does not punish any of his children for doing good. And I say that truth mentally and verbally to myself. And I believe it because it's true. I continue to do my work. I forgot about the pain, the bleeding, whatever happened. The thought of it was completely wiped out of my thinking. It was yesterday actually that I looked at my finger when I remember what happened. To my greatest surprise, I couldn't find the trace of it. It was like it never happened. My finger was completely healed. In fact, I could not even recognize which finger it was because there was no trace of it. There was no swelling or pain of whatsoever. It was completely disappeared because it was never sent from God and it has no authority to stay. I'm so grateful that I was able to learn this from this church, knowing that whenever error comes, that we should counterattack the error with the truth, which we have here in abundance. I'm so grateful that God brought me here for everything I'm learning in this church. I'm certainly grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead. Okay, Chardell, we didn't hear you. You may be on mute where you are.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Definitely.
Okay. I have been learning at Plainfield Church with the help of a practitioner to be more mindful of God, God in everything and everything in God. So when I had two things pop up involving my car, I waited and trusted to be led as to what to do instead of fretful worry like usual. And everything worked out beautifully. A friend helped me get what I needed for my rear light, and her husband installed it. I got rides to and from the company that supplied me with 2 new tires. All done Saturday and Monday. What a blessing. I want to tell you that I want to read part of the watch from last night because it explains what happened. Quote, to trust in the Lord means to trust in one's ability to demonstrate God's presence and power. That's Gilbert Carpenter. And I also have to add quickly that one of the men at the tire shop was very grumpy in the morning. And by the time the afternoon came, he was kind, cheerful, and most helpful. All because of Plainfield. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Finding so much joy in building my pottery shop because it has given me an opportunity to prove that material law is a liar. Material law dictates the impossibilities of a person, female, up in years, with a diagnosis of severe spinal injury to be able to accomplish such a huge building project on their own. Physically impossible, it says. Social law says women are weak and are not capable of doing construction work or should not be doing men's work. My family has told me to hire it done. My friend says, I don't know how you're doing it, but I know how. God. I have learned through the study of Christian Science that we are not governed by material or social law and their limitations. We are governed by spiritual law alone. Every task is another chance to listen for God's guidance and to be obedient to Him. Every failure is another chance to grow from my mistakes. I'm learning to discern the voice of God above all the rumbling of human willpower and pride. I'm learning to trust in God so completely that I don't take a step until I hear His voice. I'm learning patience and persistence. I'm learning that with God, I am capable of doing so much more than I ever thought I could. If I only think about how I mentally feel, I have no concept of age or inability. I feel like a kid having fun. This project seems to be molding me anew and bringing me closer to God. I'm very grateful that He has been with me every step of the way. Grateful for the practitioner help I've received through all of this. Her encouraging words, prayers, and love have kept me lifted in truth. All things are possible with God. I'm grateful for Mrs. Eddy and her dedication to giving the world Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you. This past Sunday, I wrestled and wept for most of the day over something that was brought up in the roundtable session. I thought it was just discouragement and self-condemnation I was feeling. But the next morning I realized that the sinew of an error in my thinking had been hit. Something for a long time I needed to acknowledge. Ingratitude. In the round table, the practitioner discussed that the only thing that could make you turn your back on God and leave the truth for worldly things was ingratitude. I had always believed, and even often said, that I was grateful for the teaching I had received in Plainfield Church. But if I was truly grateful to God, I never would have left, and even would have used it consistently these past 12 years. Ingratitude caused me to compare myself and my situation to what I saw others had, and that led to my being dissatisfied and thus ungrateful to God for what He had given me. I'm looking at everything with new eyes now. Interestingly, that morning, when I opened to the daily calendar statement on the church website, it read, "Gratitude is the sunshine of life." I'm grateful to God for this lesson and for the practitioner for helping me to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg from New Jersey, go ahead.
And I got it the day my unemployment money stopped, and the day before my original contract would have stopped. It had been cut short for the client had run out of funds, they say. And I thank God. And then when I went to the interview, when I got the job, prior to getting the job, I realized my car, it's a little slightly farther than it was before working. My car may not make it, and so I knew I needed a new one, and I asked for support. And my son and I went. We found something that was sturdier and in great condition. Where we got an original car, my current car, and my wife's. And I just felt so like an honest salesman was there. I just felt so good with them, and knew this was the right thing. And every little obstacle was overcome. Because I was in between jobs, my debt-to-income ratio was too high for me to get a regular, inexpensive loan. But my wife's debt-to-income ratio was very low, and her credit was through the roof. So beautifully, she was so happy to put the loan on her. Get the loan for me, and I'll still pay it, of course, but it was great. She was smiling all the time. So God takes you all the way, and practitioner, right along with that, was so encouraging and supportive. And my brother's here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom from Iowa, go ahead.
I've recently moved back into my own apartment. I'm grateful to God and for practitioner help that enabled me to go home and stay in my own place. For a while, I thought I would have to go to a residential care facility because of mental health issues, but I soon realized I didn't have to go that route and stay in my own apartment. Since getting practitioner help, my mental state has improved. There's been less of paranoia or fear, and now I'm learning that God gave me and everyone a sound mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to express my gratitude this evening for these Wednesday night testimony meetings where we share with others our healings and advancements in Christian Science. Last week, I was particularly grateful for a testifier who spoke about his recognition that he had been reacting with anxiety whenever the phone rings, and how he has been able to curb this behavior. It rang a bell with me, and I realized that though as a student here at Plainfield, I have been cured of my basic fears, I too overreact when the phone rings. Since then, I have found it surprisingly easy to curb that behavior, maintaining my poise in a way that I had not been doing before. And the reason it has been particularly important for me is that since I am still in the midst of working to maintain my equanimity when a bigger challenge or problem comes up, I see this new phone behavior as a very good entry into not reacting to any magnetic or hypnotic suggestion that would try to rob me of my peace as God's child, my God-given dominion. I am very grateful to all those who have helped me at Plainfield, especially my practitioner, to my fellow church members, to Mrs. Eddy for giving us science and health with key to the scriptures, and always to God. And thank you for those inspiring readings.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Tonight I want to share a testimony that I experienced a few weeks ago in hopes that it will help somebody else or encourage them if they find themselves in a similar challenge or maybe in the future they hear this. As long as I can remember, certain sounds like dogs drinking out of a water bowl would drive me to distraction. And I often would have to leave the room, and it was often embarrassing and definitely disruptive. There were many theories over the years of what this might be and suggestions made to help me, but I think it only grew worse. And so the other day when I was in the kitchen and this sound started, the immediate thought came to me, if God made my ears so I could hear, then they could only be for blessing, not for suffering. And immediately that intense upsetness within me stopped. And I just noticed the other day that I was in the room and I didn't even notice the sound. And I know this may sound very simple to some people if it's never bothered you, but it was an amazing demonstration for me. And I am so grateful for all that I'm learning at Plainfield that gave me the understanding to address this situation. As the reading said tonight, the earth is the Lord's, and God bless them. Thank you very much for this beautiful service this evening and providing it for us. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm very grateful tonight for a healing that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had been experiencing some symptoms associated with what they call a bladder infection. I tried to work for myself for a couple of days but did not get better. So the next morning I called a practitioner from the Plainfield Church for help. She said, no foreign substance nor anything inharmonious could enter being. And she asked me to read the Eustace article on infection and to call her back in a day or two. In the Eustace article, it said, quote, where morbid infection claims to be, there is the presence of mind, capital M, imparting the infection of spirituality, the beauty of holiness. Well, that was just so calming and so just wonderful to think about. Needless to say, by the end of the day, I was doing much better, and by the end of the next day, the symptoms were gone, and I was able to tell the practitioner the good news. I'm very grateful for this church and for practitioner help given from this church, and also for Mrs. Eddy's pure Christian Science that is taught and practiced in this church. Thank you and good night.
And thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you for the beautiful readings tonight on God as only creator and his perfect creation. I wanted to express gratitude for this church, and I'm especially grateful for what I'm learning about the Bible. Every week I'm learning something new, and it's opened up so much to me. The stories in the Bible have touched me so deeply. Last week's lesson on Stephen and his steadfastness in spite of being stoned, and Paul's conversion, was so powerful, for example. I'm starting to understand the Bible in a spiritual way, and I wonder how I've missed this revealing my whole life. A couple of weeks ago, my oldest son came into my room while I was reading the Bible. He sat there quietly doing something on his phone, and then he said, "You sure read the Bible a lot." And I said, "You know, there are many things that happened in the Bible that are happening now, so we can learn lessons from it." And I just left it at that, but I was just grateful to quietly express that to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lillian from New Jersey, go ahead.
A couple of weeks ago, I suddenly had a pain in my right hip and knee, standing up and sitting down. It was very, very uncomfortable. I started wondering what I did. Right then, I held to perfect God, perfect man, me, and that I'm God's spiritual reflection and not material. Well, holding to this, the problem subsided, and I persisted in keeping my thoughts active in this truth, in God's goodness. I realized several days ago that all the pain was gone. I didn't dwell on it. I dwelled on God and His perfection. Because I wouldn't accept it in my thought, all is perfect as God made it. I thank God for this healing, for all the practitioner help I've had over the years, and for this wonderful way of life this Teddy gave to us in Christian Science. And thank you for those readings.
Thank you. Carol, go ahead.
Traffic was quite heavy in this area tonight, and driving home, I just sat there and thanked God, because years ago I used to be a horribly aggressive driver, and I would swerve around cars. It was awful. And not only my driving, but how I felt. I felt anxious, and I felt, like I really had to do this. But I had been thinking a lot, this was several years ago, I had been thinking a lot about place. And I found myself in traffic, of course, and I began to think place, my place. My place was given to me by God, and no one can take my place. They have their place. And I just kept reasoning with that for a little while, and it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. And I no longer have that feeling. I am so very grateful. I just was thanking God for it again tonight, because being in that situation, I'd have fussed and fumed, and it was peaceful, and it was lovely, and the traffic moved very slowly, but it moved, and we all got home. And I just am so very grateful for that. That horrible compulsion it's a burden. It's just not anything that God would send. And I'm so very grateful to God and grateful to know His love and His care. And thank you for those readings tonight. They were beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, this is Bruce. Well, our lesson this week from the Golden Text informs us that God gave us the spirit of a sound mind. And my testimony tonight is just some gratitude for teaching we received here in the church many years ago, and that is that every morning before we get out of bed we should say that God is mind, God is my mind, and that God is the only pure mind. And the instruction was to say this every morning. Well, it's been many, many years, and to a large extent I've done it. I think the instruction never said, okay, that's enough, you can stop it now. So I think the implication meaning that it's a good thing we do every day. Well, doing something every day and not thinking just a repetition requires some effort, like to get the essence of it. I mean, it's a fundamental fact that God indeed is mind, and that He is also our mind, and He's the only pure mind. And I'd like to say that it's done a couple of things for me. One of which is it made me far less fearful. But the other one, and that is pretty significant, but the other one I also felt was very significant. It's made me much less judgmental. There was a time, and it seems like it's not that long ago, that no matter what happened, I had to have my own opinion about it. But often it was a misjudgment. You know, if it's not for me to formulate an opinion on, then I don't have to formulate an opinion on it. Because the one and only mind is God. God knows what the right thing is. So I'll leave it in God's hands, and I don't feel like I need to be judging things. Because all too often when I did, it turned into, it was wrong, I'll say. In other words, when I was thinking that way, I wasn't thinking with the sound mind. But to put God in the picture as the one and only mind is indeed sound practice for all of us. And it's been very helpful for me when I've done it. So I'm thankful for the teaching. Wonderful lesson this week. It brings forth the simple yet profound fact that God did indeed give us a spirit of a sound mind. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to express my gratitude for all I am learning in this church. In Sunday's roundtable, there was a statement that had and is still having a profound effect. It was when a practitioner said this: "Be grateful that God loves us. It is only God's love that we have from other people, so we never lose it." I don't know if I can describe what that means to me. Finally actually realizing that personal sense is just a big lie, that God is all and in all. And this is not just words. I can see how this heals a sense of loss over losing a person or a pet. They are not lost. In fact, this has really helped me to let go of some sad thoughts that have been plaguing me. We don't look to persons. God supplies everything to everyone every minute, and we only need to look to Him. This is giving me a sense of freedom that I never had before, and I am so very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for those readings tonight and all the wonderful testimonies that are so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Lawrence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Tonight I'd like to give gratitude for what I've learned in this church, part of it being how we should love out, a term I heard from the teachings in Plainfield. It makes me every day get into the practice of, after praying and all that, ask God what His purpose and plan is for my day. And I've also learned that I need to listen and to obey what the voice says. One morning recently, I heard, after my prayers and everything, I heard, "Go for a walk." It wasn't exactly the time that I would go, but I kept hearing this, "Go for a walk." As I got down our driveway, I saw the man that has been doing our lawn for over 20 years. He was bent down, but I felt led to go to him. When I got down there, he stood up and I saw that his jaw was swollen. He kept telling me about it, and he said something that didn't feel so good. He said that, well, the swelling is going down his throat, and that if that's what God wants, then He's all right with it. I know that he's a very religious man. He really has faith in God. So when he said that, I said, no, I don't think God would allow anything like that. And with that, he said, well, you can pray for me then. As I went away from him, I kept affirming the truth about man as we've learned through Christian Science. What the scientific statement of being says about man, the definition of man in the glossary as well as in recapitulation from our textbook, all that is right about man. And I kept praying with that, and even after the walk, every time he came to my thought that day, I prayed again with those beautiful truths about what we really are. 2 days later, he came back, and he was so excited. He spent some time with me. The swelling was gone. He said, it's all gone. And he was so grateful. He said, I knew I had a prayer friend. This is so important to me because it really tells me that every day my thoughts should be off of me and to love out, to be concerned with who I can bless, to ask God for his direction, because he already always has a purpose and plan for our days. So I just wanted to share this, and I know that others are doing the same everywhere. What we learn, we are to share, to bless the world. And I'm so grateful for everything I've learned through this church that has helped me so much. It's changed my life. And I'm grateful for everything else that I'm learning. Grateful for the readings. They were beautiful. And grateful for every testimony and the hymns.
Thank you.